Hello, everyone. Today we have an incredible customer story with our friends from Brinks Home Security. And joining me today are CIO Phil Coulterman, CISO Mike Coogan. We have Ken Hensler, who is manager of systems, and we have Derek Morris, who is the lead director of networks. And Phil, I want to start with you. You brought us into this story and kind of, when we had some discussions about this, you really mentioned there were some significant business drivers that led Brinks to evaluate your data center strategy. So kind of what were the catalysts that brought this, the disaster recovery conversation you were having and this data center plan together?
Sure. We had been talking about developing a disaster recovery service for literally years. And, with a lot of things that are critical and not urgent, it's always hard to find a catalyst and frankly find the money to invest in that area of the business. We had a big opportunity with our leasing strategy, kind of exiting COVID, to exit our primary corporate headquarters. And one of the things that we found was we had one major problem, and that was our data center was in the building, and it was our primary data center for the company. And so that created the catalyst for us to be able to kind of bring these things together and find a way to invest in disaster recovery and solve that broader data center problem. So that's how we got here. And fortunately, we'd been talking to Expedient for some time about the service opportunity, and we were able to make it happen.
So, like, how much of that office space were you trying to get out of?
Yeah. We are a B2C company, so we serve 700,000 customers with their home security needs. And as such, we have a huge call center operation. With COVID, none of those resources came back into the office. So we were looking at the opportunity to exit approximately 75% of our corporate office space, and we're executing that plan right now. So a really huge opportunity to cut a major expense, and we're excited that we were able to enable that with the broader move.
So how does IT play into that? Obviously, there's you've enabled the call center people to work from home, but this, how does IT play into that whole exit of the building and then also of the data center?
Yeah, let me just kind of explain the strategy that we were looking to execute. I think somewhat novel. We planned and executed to utilize the disaster recovery as a service as our primary data center so that we could move the physical data center out of this building. So we built out the disaster recovery as a service. We executed a number of tests. We then cut over so that we were running the corporation on the disaster recovery as a service. And then, as that completed, we moved back to a primary data center arrangement with the advantage that now we have a working disaster recovery solution in place should we need it for, specific workloads or for the entire operational experience in the future.
So you basically used this as this is a disaster. You pretended that, hey, this building's going away, because it was. And you got to live out the dream/nightmare of probably a whole lot of IT people listening to this.
Yes.
Was there any concerns about losing that sort of direct physical access to the data center? And then how did our partnership with you guys address those concerns?
Yeah, lots. I mean, the fact that our primary data center was located in our building, our secondary data center was located here in the Dallas metro area, meant that we had always had physical access to the location. And that not being able to put hands on it, I think, is a big problem for IT team members to get their heads wrapped around. Derek, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about how we sort of got there?
Yeah, I think the key thing, with once you start removing our access to quickly access something physically, especially with some of our equipment just can't be virtualized. It's physical equipment that's specific to our industry that needs hands on it sometimes. And the key to that was finding a partner that we could trust and rely on to be those smart hands for us when we need them. You get spoiled being able to walk out of your office into the data center and check on something. But in a disaster situation or in a situation where we're doing a controlled failover, we need somebody hands on. We need somebody hands on, and just being able to rely on the staff at Expedient to be those hands has been really great for us. We've used them a couple times, especially during the initial build out of all of this. We've had to, can you check if this cable's plugged in here, or what's this device showing on the display, or even moving things and whatnot. So it's been the critical piece is having a partner we can trust. It's a little scary at first, and there's always some apprehension, but at the end of the day, it's been really great for us.
I think, AJ, from my perspective, it's really, everyone says they have that service. Everyone says that they're a great partner to be able to get something done in a pinch or provide capability. Expedient really has been a great partner. I often say that we have vendors and we have partners, and I don't know how you convince someone of that other than talk to customers. And so we're a customer saying, Expedient has been a great partner to work with. And this is just one example of where that's come up.
And we appreciate that. And you're echoing a lot of the things I say all the time. I'm like, I can tell you how great we are, but I also work here. I have the shirt on. So this is it's kind of hard for me to come across that way and mean it. And have you recognize that we are actually that good at that? I think one of the other things that you mentioned, Derek, was you guys have a fairly specialized industry, right? Home security and security services are not exactly run of the mill. And you have your own audit requirements, your own needs there. So Mike, I know one of the things that you guys brought in was UL certification, or Underwriters Laboratory certification. Can you talk about some of those requirements and like, why is that a challenge for organizations and then providers attempting to help with that?
So I don't really look at it as a challenge, right? I look at it as part of what we do. And to better understand what that is, what we do is we are a life safety company. We protect people, we protect assets. And it's not unreasonable that the federal government would want to ensure that we have the ability to receive alarms and communicate with law enforcement and emergency services at any given time, regardless of what's going on. So that was not surprising or particularly difficult. We actually have an excellent VP of monitoring here. His name's Rick Sheets. And he and I worked together, and he said, look, Mike, this is about good management. Right. So how are you running your organization? How are you running your IT configuration? And how do we make sure that remains? It's not about, and there are a lot of them. Okay, let me be clear. It's like any other compliance regime, whether it be PCI, whether it be SOX, and I've been worked in financial services, EPA regulations, SOX, all that. But the reality is there's a whole laundry list of things you have to do, but get away from that and just do good IT management, invest in partners that are willing to do that level of good IT management, and make sure that you're built to accomplish your mission. And if you do those things, generally the UL certification comes out of that, right? There's always going to be something like, did we really get this battery with the right thing written on it at that point in time, right? We need to make sure that we are on point and 100% disciplined about doing it all the time. But even more than being a requirement from UL, it's a management requirement that our mission is to do this, and we will do this, and we will execute on this flawlessly.
So what was that audit process like? And were there any moments where you were just like, oh, I don't know if this is going to work, or you were certain that we were going to get past this, or you saw that we were going above and beyond what you were expecting?
So the reality is I have complete faith. I've been here it's like literally 51 weeks, I believe, right? So I've been here for almost a year. I'm new to the organization, but the management commitment to transparency and compliance and doing all the rest, I didn't have a lot of fear per se. There's always that nervousness when you go into an audit that, there's going to be some tiny detail, some place that you didn't quite get to because of whatever reason. And, working with guys like, okay, we're not going to yell at you. We need to understand this. We need to understand how do we go from here to there now, has been just been something I've been doing for 25 years, right? And again, whether it's PCI, whether it's SOX, whether it's UL, it's a long list of things, compensating controls and all of that. I come from a security background, so we're very familiar with that. The process is much like any other audit, right? I mean, I've been audited internally and externally, work for public companies, and, they show up with some framework, right? It's not your framework. You don't get to choose for them, unfortunately, but here's the framework and here's how we're going to go after this, et cetera. What I have found unique about Brinks Home Security, and particularly in partnership with you, is we're just going to get this done. I mean, it's not really we don't have conversations about being compliant. We are compliant. And then how do we make sure that we're in a position to demonstrate that compliance? Because compliance is not the goal at our organization. Our goal is to be there when you call us, period.
Right.
So
I think this is the thing about compliance that most people forget. It's somebody, whether you wrote this or somebody else did, that is a thing that you have to do. And then you do that. And then you show proof that you did that. It's not that hard. It's how hard is it?
It's aligned perfectly with our mission. Absolutely aligned perfectly with our mission.
Yeah. And that proof is the hardest part. I had to pull all these reports. I had to put all these things together. That's the part that stinks about doing compliance things. But for the most part, if what you were doing is the right thing in the first place, it's not hard to show the proof.
Right.
So as part of that, obviously, there were some changes that had to be made, right? You're failing over to a DR environment that you did not have before. So Derek, I guess, is there a kind of talk me through some of the networking things? Because one of the things that we always talk about is we moved this workload from here to here and it magically works. But workloads are only as good as the things that they can talk to, and they need some way to talk to that. So talk me through some of those like upgrades or changes that were made and, kind of those specific improvements. How did that impact what you were doing in your operations?
Yeah. So when we first started talking about this, the thing that popped out to me immediately is the amount of data that we're going to need to replicate and move at any given time. And that workload's constantly changing with, using Nutanix, it gives us a lot of flexibility to scale up when we need to, and the network has to be ready for that. So we took the opportunity in our primary data center to upgrade to a leaf spine architecture, and upgrade all of our top of rack switches to either 40 or 100 gig uplinks. And that gives us a really scalable backbone for high demand workloads. And it gives us some runway to, in the future, if we want to use that full 100 gig uplink, we can. And then the other portion of that, I guess the other side of the card there is getting that data over to Expedient. Traditionally we would have used an MPLS circuit, and that's what we had when I came here to Brinks about 2 years ago. We took the opportunity to look at that architecture and see how we can do it better, how we can do it more reliably, and how we can do it in a secure way. So we leveraged SD-WAN technology through Cato. The ability to put our appliances in the Expedient data center changed the game for us because it allows us to have that end-to-end control over the data as it's moving. And Cato gives us a private backbone, which is essentially private circuits throughout the globe, that we're able to move our data, place zero trust rules around it, and do it reliably and in a high availability fashion. So yeah, it allowed us to re-architect things and do the things we might have done the way we would have wanted to from the beginning. I wasn't here at the beginning of Brinks, but I'm here now. Kind of gave us a new beginning in that aspect.
And I think that's the part that when you're starting to talk about DR, that data doesn't stay still, right? It's constantly changing. It's constantly being updated. You're going to have to move data from point A to point B. For you guys with, the literal security requirements as part of what you guys do as an organization, having that control is important. And that's where our co-location comes into play, where you can land your appliances. You also mentioned some of the gear that you have that's just not virtualizable, but being able to connect that across into a DR environment that's managed, I think is where you guys get the best of both worlds. You get the thing that you actually wanted, but also you're not tied into, well, it has to go into this specific box, otherwise it's never going to work for you. How did that change for you, given the fact that now you have this other environment? You needed to, increase what you were doing. Obviously, you went from, traditional distribution to access switch to leaf spine. What does that change for you from like an automation standpoint? Because now you have this new architecture to work off of. So what does that mean for you going forward about DNS and firewall rules and network things? How does that all play in?
Yeah, and that's a great question. Doing the disaster recovery as a service, things have to stay in sync on both sides. And trying to do that manually with human intervention constantly it's near impossible. So leveraging automation and AI wherever we can is absolutely key. The Cato appliances allow us to do that. Standardizing more of the things that we do. We were already a very change-oriented organization. We manage it well, especially on the dev side. But increasing the rigor on that was important. Because now changes need to be replicated on both sides. They need to be, we need to ensure that everything's documented. There's pre-flight checklists, there's procedures for everything. And that plays back into the smart hands as well. Because if we can provide that documentation to the engineers over at Expedient, it makes their lives much easier to help us. So basically just, maturing our processes so that they're predictable, they're secure, and they're audit ready. Is what we've been striving for. I don't think we'll ever reach a point where we say, okay, we could stop now. But that process gets better and better, every day as we iterate through this.
I think that's that continuous improvement in intention, really. It's, hey, we can't stop. It's not, oh, we're automated, period. It's, we are automating. It is always a present tense verb. And I think being able to spend that amount of time, and also for Phil, from a leadership standpoint, to say, hey, we should invest this time here, because a lot of times it's just get it done. We'll deal with it later. Later never comes, right? So being able to take that time up front to do it, I think right up front is probably for the best.
Yeah, and part the key thing on our side was leadership support. Throughout this whole endeavor, the business has supported us. They've allowed us to question why we're doing things and where we're doing things. Kind of push that status quo and see why, what we can change and improve. And it's, without the business support, it's impossible. And without a strong partner like Expedient, it's impossible.
So, Ken, as a manager of systems, you have the lovely time of having to execute those DR tests, right? So, as Phil mentioned, you guys use the DR to do the failover to exit out of the existing data center. So, what was that first disaster recovery test like? Did you have any sort of surprises or, level of confidence going into it?
Sure. The first tests were really smaller, non-production VMs. Doing it that way allowed us to validate the process, get familiar with it without impacting any of our critical production workloads and systems. So as our systems engineers, Patrick Ton, Jason Davis, gained confidence with the technology, observed it in real time through the portal, it progressively expanded the scope. Eventually, we were able to schedule some of these tests of an evening where we would test running an entire production workload, SQL servers, for example, which are not small. Back to what Derek was suggesting, multi-terabytes of replication and failover. So, yeah, eventually being able to test that, it was definitely a major milestone for us. The biggest surprise, I would say, was really just how smooth it was, being able to scale up, starting with those first couple of machines in the playbook, and just expand it. Go from 10 machines to 50 machines, and just watch it sequentially to go through and successfully fail over. The visibility that we had with the portal and being able to see in real time, it certainly helped gain the confidence and become familiar with it and trust that it's going to work the way that we need to and when it needs to work. So
that real-time angle is really important. I hate when I have to hit refresh like 50 times in order to make sure, like, okay, did it do the thing? Is it doing the thing? And I'm going to hit refresh until I see it like the progress bar completely clear out. So I totally understand that level of, I guess, anxiety of like, is this actually doing its thing? How has that changed now that you have the managed disaster recovery services with us? Like, how does that change day to day when you're thinking about, hey, we're bringing in this workload and being able to fail it over? Did you have any concerns about losing control? We mentioned the, sort of the physical aspect of it, but in terms of like, you're not responsible for patching those hosts or managing those hosts, and how did that compare to what your expectations were?
Sure. Yeah. So initially, as Derek kind of alluded to, we did have a little worry of losing that control over some of arguably the critical infrastructure. In reality, though, having this partnership really simplified our responsibilities. What it allowed us to do is focus on managing the infrastructure that we own at the primary data center, and not have to worry about managing that physical hardware at Phoenix, at the Expedient data center. So by doing that, it allows us to kind of shift our focus to think about things from a performance tuning standpoint. It allows us to focus on security hardening, strategic improvements, rather than focusing on those day-to-day troubleshooting. And I'll tell you, some of our collaboration, back to thinking about this from a partner standpoint, working really closely with Sundown, Siri Marco, and Ben Yolk on the project management side has been outstanding. And they definitely do treat us as partners, not just customers. So that's another thumbs up on their part.
Yeah, and I will pass along the thank you to Ben and to Sundown, because that's the part that, from like a sales process, it's neat. Our solutions engineers are great. Our salespeople are great. Our delivery people and operations people are fantastic, but you don't get to find that out until you're actually a customer. So I always love getting to shout them out. You guys also have, you're doing this with AHV, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of the things that most people think about with disaster recovery in terms of array replication and then some other automation or software that sits on top that's doing that. What did you learn about moving AHV instances during this that gives you that confidence in the ability to be flexible going forward?
We learned a lot. To take a quick step back, as part of this journey, we went from being a VMware ESXi hypervisor shop to and running that on Nutanix, and now we shifted to the AHV hypervisor. And so we learned a lot during this whole process. We learned that the hypervisor level portability is achievable without complexity when we have the right orchestration tools. The Expedient demonstration was, it allows us to do these live migrations of the entire cluster for the most part. And so what that allowed us to do is, as Phil had mentioned earlier, we were able to completely fail over our entire production workload, our, the essentially the entire data center. We were able to fail that over. We have AHV hypervisors running on both sides. So we have the orchestration in place to where the virtual machines are constantly taking snapshots. It's taking keeping the changed bits as you had alluded to earlier, keeping them updated on the Phoenix side, so that in the event that we need to do a planned failover for a strategic move, or in the event that there is a true disaster and the primary data center is lost, or the network, the internet goes out, for example, or something more tragic happens, there's automations in place that will see that the connectivity is no longer there, and I need to come online from the Phoenix side and execute that in a minimal disruption point of view, even across geographically dispersed data centers, Dallas to Phoenix, for example. So
Yeah, that's been what we work with a lot of customers on, is how do we put you in a position to be more resilient? And Phil, now with that DR platform in place, how does that help you think about the future? What does this now open up that you may or may not have had access to before?
Yeah, from my perspective, I sort of think about it at a strategic level. And Ken alluded to it. I think we've become much more comfortable with the ability to move workloads. And, as a home security provider, we have some unique physical requirements where we're going to have physical assets for some parts of our business. And Expedient's been a great partner with that, outside of Nutanix, that still exists. But as I look to the future, the flexibility that we've seen with AHV, we could put the workloads in a lot of different arrangements with Expedient, and feel good about it, and be able to manage those things going forward. So, Ken's really our resident expert here. I don't know, Ken, strategically, as you look down the road, what do you see here?
thanks, Phil. Yeah, the other thoughts is, the fact that we've had this successful implementation of DRaaS and leveraging Expedient's Colo, it's transformed DR from being more of a contingency plan to a platform for innovation. And what I mean by that is, if you think about from a platform engineering perspective, it allows us to standardize environments across our on-prem private as well as public cloud. It enables consistent automation pipelines, allowing us to use our tooling like Octopus Deploy, things like Terraform for infrastructure as code, of course, the Nutanix Prism Central APIs for some additional automation. But by and large, it supports that self-service provisioning models for developers. Kind of really, at the end of the day, we may have really great infrastructure, and we love the Nutanix and the AHV, but our infrastructure exists for the developers to run the code. The developer experience is kind of where we're trying to shift our focus and ensure that the developers have the systems, the tools, the network, the infrastructure that they need to run the applications. So
let me just add on to that. I hope if people pick up one thing from this, it is none of this has been easy. There's no easy button to doing this, but it is achievable, and it is super important to have a great partner in doing it. This is not something where there's no company that has the internal expertise in this in their organization that they're going to do this on their own. And if we didn't have a great partner with Expedient or like Expedient, we would not have been able to achieve what we've been able to do. And it's been a great year, and it's been a huge transformation for our organization overall, to Ken's point, and opens up a lot of possibilities. So,
and right,
I think a key thing that Ken said really was, we're going to get to a place, and it's not going to be easy, but we're going to get to a place where you shouldn't care about where your code's running, right? All those infrastructure things, let us worry about that. We'll provide them. And then you just move between the environments where people don't ask, well, wait, is that in Phoenix or in Dallas? And we're starting to get there. We're not 100% there yet, but we're starting to get there. And we've seen that change over this work in the past 4 months.
And that's a huge shift, right? You're not just keeping the lights on, you're not worried about how bright they are. And that is something that I have tried to pass along to people who listen to our webinars and people who listen to, our talks, is that you can get past that part. And yes, there is effort involved in doing it, but there is a value to it at the end of that rainbow. And once you've done that move, you've made that jump, now you can say, okay, well, I would like to change this thing. I'm not worried necessarily about, do the lights come on or are they off and I need to get them back on? It's how do I make sure that this continues running and I can make sure that my developers, my end users have more resilient infrastructure and they're not worried about what it is. They're worried about how they use it. And I think that's the biggest jump of all. Any final thoughts before we wrap up here?
Well, thank you guys for what you do. We love talking about it. So,
and with that, I will send it back to live Q&A, and we will see you. Which is right here and right now. I'd like to welcome back the entire team from Brinks. Welcome back, guys. We got a few questions in the registration. We always thank the folks when they're registering. They ask honestly really great questions. And I think we can go ahead and take the first one here, which will pop up on the bottom of the screen. DR is generally never a money-making part of the business. How do you justify and manage DR cost? And did the fact that you ran the entire business on DRaaS during your HQ exit make things easier now and in the future? And I guess we can go to Phil for this one first.
Yeah. Couple thoughts here. One, we would have not done this had the team not been looking at DR proactively and asking the question, how do we get here, right? Looking at, and I think I always say that the best planning means that you have a desk drawer somewhere where you have thought about what the future should look like. And if somebody comes over and says, hey, I have an opportunity, you can reach in that desk drawer and pull out the plan and say, this is what we should do. And you've already worked out that strategy. And we have that long range plan, and DR was on our long range plan without the perfect, funding mechanism to be able to make it work. And that's how we ended up here. The HQ move just gave us the opportunity to execute on that plan that we had already thought about. And I think that's important, as you think about managing IT overall.
Kind of have the desk drawer full of dreams, I think is what I'm hearing here. Yeah. Make sure that you can always reach into it and pull something out. I think we see this a lot. A lot of times when organizations have that opportunity of, hey, we need to leave this building, it pulls a lever that you never really thought about before. We also see this a lot when people are looking at technology shifts, is something has happened to cause that to then occur, because otherwise people are fine to just stay in place, and that inertia holds everything together. Was there any other challenges? And this is kind of going into the next question here. What challenges did you have that kind of led those dreams to stay in the drawer before implementing services with us? And then what were the benefits realized after that implementation?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really a cost issue. And what we've seen is you have to be willing to take some cost up, some expense up, to be able to reap some benefits in the future. And I think that as we go through these questions, I'm sure you'll hear more about all the things that we've been able to do since then. But you have to be able to take that leap.
Yeah, and I think we see a lot of times there is that cost shift, that money-making part of the business. It's when they start to look at that and say, this is also a cost avoidance. This is a thing that can potentially lower costs elsewhere. I know that cyber insurance recently has been really ratcheting up the amount of emphasis they're putting on recoverability and resiliency, and not just, do you have antivirus and do you use a VPN? It's, hey, if something were to happen, how would you recover? And so some of this is also potential insurance cost avoidance. So there's other ways to look at it versus just, this is going to generate more revenue. Also, the amount of revenue you generate when you're down is zero. So think about it that way as well, is that if you are no longer online, you are not generating any revenue. So those are the sorts of things we generally work through when we're talking to a client.
Yep.
We can go to the next question. We kind of talked about this a little bit, and I think maybe this might be more for the rest of the team. So what other sort of issues were you guys experiencing with, was it getting gear? Was it running out of space? Were you guys running into any sort of challenges like that? And then post-migration, how has that worked?
I mean, I can go. I can at least kick this off, and then I'll probably punt it over to the team. But I think it's important to recognize that in addition to being a DRaaS customer, Brinks Home is also, we bought Space and Power from Expedient for some of our other things that could not be virtualized, and so it's a full disaster recovery solution. And in this refresh of our facility, we really took the opportunity to clean up a lot of legacy gear and relay the entire space, both in the disaster recovery location and in our primary data center. Derek or Ken, I don't know if you guys want to pop in there, but
yeah, I'll add to that real quick. Just to, it gave us an opportunity to rethink why we're doing things. We're moving to a greenfield. We were able to implement things, not only in compliance, but how we would like to see them, and how the latest technologies, support those things and provide us with the most reliability and scalability. So just having that opportunity to kind of redo things from a different perspective was very, very helpful.
One last thing to add to that, just thinking about business issues, we'll say prior to setting up the DR as a service, we effectively had one system that we regularly performed failovers to the disaster recovery data center at the time. And after that, we've done this, we've done this at the Nutanix, at the hypervisor level. And so now we have the entire production workloads that can be failed over and have that resilience.
And I think one thing that's important, I touched on it briefly on the recorded part of this, is it helped us get the organization into a place where they're not worrying about where something is happening and they're more focused on what is happening, right? So partnership with Expedient allowed us to say, hey, you know what? Next year, we may choose to run workloads in Azure or AWS and those kinds of things. And it really got the organization over an intellectual hump of stop thinking about you need to control every dial physically, that we're really going to virtualize this and we're really going to be that organization that we've talked about for so long.
Yeah, there's always been the term server huggers in terms of like, these are people who feel like they have to be on-prem. And obviously you guys mentioned being able to go down the hall and see the blinking lights and see the thing that you want to touch or change or work with is something that a lot of people feel like I can't give this up. I can't make that change. It's too much of a leap. And then once people actually make the jump, they go, oh, actually, it's just over there. It's fine. It's okay. So I think this is that's a big one that we run into a lot. And if you feel like you can't have your thing, you can't have things that you can't see, co-location is great for that. I mean, we constantly are connecting co-location to our managed services and managed platforms. So things like, Nutanix as a service is a great example of this. We know people can't get rid of everything. That's why we do co-location, those things together, and that's what really makes us successful as a provider in terms of connecting all those things together. I think we'll go to the next question here. What was the hardest decision you had to make during this transition? Not technically, but organizationally. And I think, Mike, you kind of alluded to it, but was that like decision to kind of let go and say, hey, there's other people who can do this too. Let them handle some of these things?
That's part of it. I mean, I think the answer to that is actually twofold. The first part of that really is around the organization. And I think Brinks Home Security is a unique place to do this kind of work because we realized we were going to have the organization test, right? IT is relatively small. It's more distributed than a lot of the places I've worked at. And having that alignment up front, again, I've been here for just over a year. The business and IT alignment was huge. And having those folks up there and stand with you when you move forward and have to pull back, move forward again, have to pull back. And I mean, this was not easy. And the business stuck with us the entire time. The other part of that organizationally, you'll need, and it was a lesson for me that Phil actually taught me, to be fair. I've been doing infrastructure for almost 30 years now. So I know how to do infrastructure. And anytime you make a massive, massive change like this, we know, and we've known this for 25 years, 97% of outages are because someone made a change, period. So when you make a big change, you do change freezes. Well, change freezes affect what application developers can roll to production, right? And they end up getting these very large pieces that they then need to roll, because you're like, okay, 2 weeks before, 2 weeks after, do nothing for a month, send all your developers on, move on, right? Because that's how we do it in infrastructure. And Phil goes, that's not, we need micro releases. And so we actually slimmed that window down, and with the support of the business and support of the app developers, we got that window into roughly a week, which from an infrastructure perspective, you're like, no, we need 3 weeks, because we know we're going to break stuff, and we've got a bunch of smart guys who are going to go fix it, but we know, and we just don't need the layers of complexity. So making sure the organization was prepared to deal with just massive change. And there was a lot, right? And there were things we didn't anticipate, and we knew that was going to happen. But the support of the organization was immense. I've never been at an organization where IT and the business were so aligned with, this is important, let's go get it done for real. And that was a great project to discover that here at Brinks Home.
Phil, was that a similar feeling that you had?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I just think, things work better when everyone works together. And this was certainly an instance where, there were no titles and no real levels. It was just, hey, we've got work to do. To Mike's point, things break, and, we all have to put our heads down and figure out why, and get them resolved, get the issues resolved.
And we can go to the next question here, because I think this is a better for Ken and Derek. What surprised you most once you actually started running those production workloads that you had failed over on DR, and like something that you didn't really expect going into that?
Sure. I can take this one. So I would say there were two main things that surprised me, and then a bonus. The first is I would say the breadth of the hidden dependencies was much bigger than it actually looks like on the diagrams that we built ahead of time. So for example, like even some of the systems that aren't hosted by us, they still route through our API layer. And so they were impacted just as much as the internal apps. And so in our planning, we had to essentially assume that every production app is affected. And because so many of those services ultimately depend on those core endpoints, we had to take that all into consideration. I would say the second thing is that the operational mechanics of switching an entire production estate it's not just fail over the VM to the other side. The reality is that it takes sequencing, it takes coordination, and doing these failovers in a controlled batch. We have to make sure that name resolution, DNS records are cleanly updated. And
DNS has never caused a problem in any sort of failover or anything like that ever in the history of time. Nope.
It's not DNS. There's no way it could be. It was DNS. It was DNS.
Yeah, wonderful haiku for all of us.
So, yeah, we learned quickly that you have to have a repeatable DNS update automation, because all of the code integrations have to rely on that stable name and not, site specific host names. So yeah. And I would say, the net takeaway is DR worked, but it forced us to treat recovery as a disciplined procedure. And again, back to the dependency mapping, batching the workloads, automated DNS and validation. And it's, not just a simple button press.
And so
Derek, was that similar to you?
Yeah, and I'll add to the first thing that Kim said about discovering those dependencies. It gave us an opportunity to make our QA process better. So we knew what to look for and what to test after each failover, and the ability to do those failovers, in a reproducible way, in a way that we know that it works, and build those playbooks around it. Then we can quickly test, are these systems up? Are these dependencies working? and get back to that fully operational state more quickly. So when we do it in a real disaster, we know that we're prepared.
And to something Ken said early, I mean, I heard this from a friend of mine, Fred, a couple of years ago. It's no one has ever been fired for being overzealous. You get fired when you don't do diligence. So if you lack diligence, that's when there are real problems. But we're okay with a little bit of overzealousness as long as you make sure you're driving towards that diligence. And that's important.
Yeah, I think that I mean, that's a quote. Everybody keep that one. Write that one down. Because I think a lot of times we just go, oh, I mean, it'll be fine. And then when it's not fine, it's a problem. And you get to answer as to, you said it was going to be fine, and then it wasn't. What happened?
Yeah.
So those are never the questions you want to be on the receiving end of. And I think this is where we can go to the next question here. But this is, I wonder if there was like a moment in this process where, you mentioned all the dependency mappings, the DNS things, all the sequencing that you put in. Was there a specific moment, or were there just multiple smaller moments where you guys said this should work, it'll be fine, to we trust that this will work?
Yeah, so I'll take that one. And I think Ken can commiserate with me, Mike and Phil as well, because they were probably on the call as well. But when we first did our first round of testing, non-production testing of the failover, we're like, oh, this should work. We should click this button and these should fail over to these VMs and work like we think it will. It didn't. And it didn't many times. The thing that made me feel comfortable when we did that is the diligence on the Expedient side. So the Expedient engineers were on the call, and these were not 30-minute, 40-minute calls. These were 8-hour calls to get this working. And it's no fault of Expedient's, our complexity, our need to get it exactly right, because we are a life safety company. So we need to know that the next time we hit that button, it does work, and we've reached that confidence point. So early on, I knew it was going to work because we had the support on both sides, and that same culture we have at Brinks of, there's no titles. We're all working on the same thing. We're all here for life safety. We felt Expedient taking that seriously and taking that same onus that we do on getting it right and getting it working.
I think we've talked about this before. We actually had Dan Limbacher, who manages our DR and recovery teams. He's been on with us on these webinars and talking through, like, we've seen a lot. We've done DR failovers for a number of different companies and a number of different levels of complexity. Some people are super simple, just make sure they turn on. Some people are very much in your boat, where there's a lot of sequencing and a lot of systems that have to go together, otherwise it doesn't work. And we've seen a lot of things, but it's impossible to see everything. And so working with a group of folks who do this all the time, I think, can also provide that level of confidence where, yeah, it didn't work. Okay, let's try it again. Okay, we know what we did. And a lot of times when we see those things, it's like, okay, we write those down in our little notebook of, hey, next time we see something like this with another customer, we know how to avoid that or work around that or handle that. So again, a shout out to Dan Limbacher and that whole team. That DR failover team is incredible. And they work weird hours, because nobody does DR tests during the day, right? It's always at Saturdays and that sorts of things. So a big shout out to them. And I guess finally, this is for the group. I'll send it to Phil first, but what, and this will be the last question here. If someone who's watching this right now is early on in their DR journey, or you're early on and kind of thinking about how to change your disaster recovery strategy, what's the mindset shift that they should make before they start?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about planning, so that's certainly one of it. It should be part of your long-range plan, and you should be thinking about it in terms of your long-range plan. But then part of that, what I think you can do early to kind of lean into this, is get comfortable with the ability to move your workloads around. And there are advantages to that, even outside of DR, or even to the ability of having DR when you don't have, or disaster recovery, even when you don't have disaster recovery as a service. If your workloads are portable and you can move them somewhere else, then your you're well on your way to being able to restore them, whether you have disaster recovery as a service or you're just going to put them somewhere else on a temporary basis. We went through that early as we switched hypervisors, and that was part of our journey there. But that, I think, helped us lean into this disaster recovery as a service.
Mike, Ken,
I
Derek.
can add to that. If I had to give someone advice as they embark on this journey, is just be prepared for things you hadn't expected to happen. Right? I mean, lots of things are going to go wrong. I think, and you're not going to get the same level of service as you enter that transition period. Now, I think what's really important to recognize, you talked about all your various clients and all their various needs, is Brinks Home Security is unique. And these guys, Derek and Ken, are they absolutely know who I am, right? Which is, and I say it many times, it's like, don't forget, every second down is somebody's grandmother hit a panic button and is not getting the service they pay us for. So let's be really clear. And they've heard me call out, that's 30 seconds, guys. Let's go. 45 seconds. And be prepared to say, that's it. We have to go back, rethink, and then push forward again. And it did take us several times to do that, and that's okay, right? I mean, you have to weigh the business benefits versus the business loss. If our systems can't receive alarms on a Saturday night, that's a train wreck for us. So we have very little time to do this, and we got sharper and better every time. But be prepared to roll back, right? It's going to take a series of steps.
Yep, and I'll add that anytime people like Ken and I hear the word as a service, we feel like there's some trade-offs. There's something we're trading off. We're trading off access. We're trading off management. Trading off reliability to the degree that we want to hold it to. But that's not always the case. Things are different than they were when cloud became the buzzword. And it's still obviously very popular. And in this case, we didn't hand off a workload for someone else to deal with, and we just used that service. This is a force multiplier for Brinks. It allows us to bring on the Expedient team and use their expertise and use their experience in maintaining a data center, doing that care and feeding that's so important, but it's also behind the scenes. It allows our teams, Ken and I's teams, to be able to architect those solutions and to just increase the rigor around them without having to worry about patching and updating and all the care and feeding the Nutanix cluster needs.
To add to that, speaking of the rigor and doing the patching, while that's not at the forefront, one of the things that I've learned, and I definitely recommend other IT managers, systems managers take this into consideration when you are running your workloads on a partner site like Expedient. While you're responsible for your own and they're responsible for their own, you're going to end up being in lockstep planning all of those changes. For example, the Nutanix AHV hypervisor, when there's updates that are needed, especially in a DRaaS type of scenario where you're replicating, you've got to coordinate those updates on both sides and keep those up to date. So,
and I think that's really like the co-management story, and we've told that story for many, many years. I'm not taking jobs, right? I want to help you do your job better. I want to take a lot of the stress off of that plate. That's really where we're focused there. And I want to thank the entire Brinks team, Phil, Mike, Derek, Ken. I want to thank all of you guys for joining us. This has been an incredible conversation. And we have a lot more conversations to talk about this year overall. Obviously, what you heard was a real customer story of resilience and recovery. And next month in February, we're going to be sharing another session that looks ahead, taking those same principles and applying those to AI and infrastructure in 2026. You're not going to want to miss that. We have more customer stories coming this year. 2026 is going to be a big year. You should join us. Again, Phil, Mike, Derek, Ken, thank you guys so much. And we'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Oh.
thank you.